having fun when old Mr. Sun is burning down to tan your body? You can tell it's summertime. We've got another outrageous day out there. If you're hanging out at the beach, checking out the waves, maybe putting on that string bikini, ouch, don't get too fried now. Keep it where you got it for all the best music, like this one, the latest from
91 Reasons.
Well, happy Halloween, everybody. It's got to be the weirdest, strangest Halloween season I've ever been through, and I work at Not Scary Farm, so Halloween for me usually is year-round, but ain't nothing like this where it ain't the ghosts and goblins trying to scare you. It's the government and the news media and you name it, man, and you just have to turn that stuff off. So thanks for joining this podcast for just a little bit of the other stuff that makes Halloween so exciting and fun. And for a kid like me, it was the greatest holiday ever. Still is. But there was something about it. You know, Christmas is its own island. You know, you write a letter to Santa, you look through the Sears catalog, then you write your letter and you circle things and you hope your mom gives Santa the list. And you know, as you get older, your choices and your tastes change. When I was a kid for Christmas, the Sears catalog had this, I think it was like a machine gun that had like a belt of rounds that went into it. I don't remember what it was called. I'll have to look it up. I wanted that thing more than life. Even during the Star Wars period, I'm like, look at that thing, man. Because it kind of looked like a toy version of the gun that they set up to shoot at the Falcon in The Empire Strikes Back when it's flying out of Echo Base, if you know what I'm talking about. They made a toy of it, you know. But, you know, that Christmas is its own thing. But Halloween, you know, I know, God, Halloween now is so crazy because it goes on so long. It begins early and goes all the way through November 1st, sometimes even longer. We've had Scary Farm some years, all the way through until November 4th and 5th. It's like, sometimes it's crazy. If Halloween lands like on a Wednesday, sometimes knots would continue haunt until Thursday, Friday, Saturday, even Sunday sometimes to get the full roster of days. That's all out the window this year. There's no Scary Farm. There's the Taste of Halloween, which is a totally different event. It's nothing like Scary Farm at all. I'm working the event. I'm very happy to be working. Work is good. I enjoy working. But it's just a different Halloween this year. So I thought I would sit down and write down some Halloween memories that I had and some of the costumes that I wore. I can remember all the way back to about 1975. I was 4 years old, and I know this because I have a picture. My mother made me a ghost costume. When I was very young, my nickname was Casper because I had a stuffed Casper doll, the kind with a plastic face. I had it for a long time after, but eventually, like, it just started to rot. And it's not a very attractive toy anyways. I probably was attracted to it because it was not attractive because it was an ugly toy. But I would sit too close to the TV and in front of the TV and blocking the TV. So someone in the family nicknamed me Casper because I thought I was a ghost and that people could see through me. So it was an ironic nickname. But my mother made me a Casper costume. I'm sure she could have gone to the store in Norwalk. Save-On's Drugs had the best Halloween selection around. It was right next to Norwalk Square. They had a full aisle, and the aisle was filled with those boxed costumes where you had to read what was on the side. They were displayed sideways to fit as many on the shelf, and you had to read what the character was, and it would say, you know, He-Man, Yoda, Boba Fett, Rainbow Bright, Optimus Prime. And I'm sure she could have gone there and found a Casper one. I'm sure they made Casper, you know, perennially every year for the holiday. But she decided to make my costume. And the costume that she made for me, she made out of unused white diapers, cloth diapers. Because remember, as old as I am, I grew up before there were disposable diapers the way they are now. And most parents, all parents, used cloth diapers and a service that would come pick them up once a week and launder them and then drop off a fresh bag. But it went the way of the milkman and the bakery truck that used to come around. And my mother had an Avon lady that came around at least once a month, and my mother would buy $20, $30 worth of Avon, which was a lot of money back then. But she made the costume out of these white diapers, and I'll tell you what, it is not a good costume. I can't find the picture anywhere. There's a picture somewhere of me standing in this costume and my sister dressed as a very nice, very appropriate ballerina. And next to her, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be. I kind of look like Jason before he got the hockey mask. Remember, in Friday the 13th Part 2, he wore the canvas bag over his head. That's kind of what I look like. Or what was that movie, Revenge of the Scarecrow? Or The Town That Dreaded Sundown? I don't remember, but I look like a crazy person. In no way does the costume look like a ghost. It just doesn't. So after that, I remember dressing up as Rocky Balboa because, Rocky was huge. And this is before Star Wars. So there, it was either pick a costume off of the shelf, which, as you can tell, my mother was not going to do, or make a costume. And I'm sure we went to the Value Village and found boxing gloves, a robe. And I remember that tube of red vampire blood that you could buy at the store. And it had the tab, the circular tab that you twisted. Like, remember how those Kool-Aid bottles had that weird tab on top? This Dracula blood had a tab like that, and then you could use the blood until it dried up, and you would just use the blood everywhere. Oh my God, I got a tube of vampire blood, and I'm going to use it till it's gone. Save enough for Halloween, but I'm going to use it. And my mother put blood on my mouth, and on my forehead, like, cut me. And I was Rocky. I can't remember if I went out Halloween without a shirt or not. I can't imagine that I did. I'm not sure what I would have worn. Maybe the robe was always pulled tight and cinched, but I don't think I went out shirtless. I can't see my mother allowing that. And most of the Halloweens in California are cold. We've had a rash of really hot ones, but back in the 70s they were cold and smoggy. So the first costume I can remember picking out for myself was around 1978. I don't think there's Halloween costumes for Star Wars yet. We're still in that weird area where the merchandise hasn't come out, and we're waiting for toys, and things are just a little, it was probably 77, 78, somewhere in that time period. I have a picture somewhere, I just can't find it, but we used to go, I discovered that my mother loved to shop at Sears at the Cerritos Mall. And I like to go because on the bottom floor of Sears, they actually had a snack bar where they had a, turn-of-the-century popcorn machine and candy and soda. And my mother would get me a popcorn and a drink, and we'd walk around Sears for 3 hours. Now, I must have been bored to tears. Remember where they'd have the round circular display of clothing, so you'd go into the middle and just hide? I can remember hiding in there with the popcorn. But then around, mid-September, Sears set up their own costume shop, Halloween shop, and it was hands down the best around. It was the best around. They had makeup applications, costume pieces, and the biggest display of Don Post masks anywhere. And I was in awe of these Don Post masks. Oh my God. To have a Don Post mask was the pinnacle of Halloween. It just really was. I used to get Starlog and Fangoria magazine at George's Foods there in Norwalk on Rosecrans and Studebaker. Before it turned into Herman's Hallmark, it was a grocery store. And I begged my mother for those magazines. And one year in the back of the magazine, they had, this would have been 1979, they had an ad for Don Post Deluxe masks. I've talked about it on the show before. They had Nosferatu with his hands for $500, and they had the facehugger for $450. Now, it was the only way to get a facehugger from Alien, for 30 plus years or more. Eventually, Spencer Gifts had a mask that when you put it on, kind of looked like a face hugger, was on your face, but it wasn't three-dimensional at all. It was just a latex mask. But these deluxe ones were astounding. And I used to just gaze at them like, oh my God, someday, Jennifer, someday, if I had that mask, I'd take it out of the case, I'd wear it, I'd be the scariest guy around. Because the Don Post masks were just the pinnacle. And Sears had this display of them. So I wanted a Don Post mask early. I knew quality when I saw it. My mother bought me a Don Post mask of the devil. It was a red devil mask of Satan. I wore red shirt, red pants, I had a red cape, and I had a red pitchfork. And I was the devil. That's the first costume I remember picking out on my own and just feeling like this is the greatest night ever. And I'm the devil. Now remember, I was brought up religious. We went to church 3 or more times a week because my mother was in the church choir. She was the church treasurer. She was on the Ways and Means Committee. You name it. She was involved in coordinating the coffee and cookies for the social hall after church every Sunday. My mother was into church. It was her social circle, that and Eastern Star, which is another religious affiliation organization. But putting that devil thing on might have been early rebellion. Like, you guys are going to make me go to church. I'm going to dress as Satan. And I loved that mask. I've tried to buy it a few times since, but it's always really expensive. And they're really brittle because they weren't made to last. The latex just erodes. There was one Don Post mask that I prized above all others, and that was the Sargoth Mask, which was a large cobra head with giant fangs. It was made as a prototype for the movie starring Dirk Benedict as a guy who turns into a snake. But I don't think it got used in the movie. The final design was different. I mean, eventually he turns into a snake and slithers off. Like, that's the movie. But this Sargoth mask was just the greatest. And I wanted to get, remember, they used to sell a robe in a bag, black or brown, and it was just called Horror Robe. Horror Robe. And I wanted the brown horror robe with the Sargoth mask, and I was going to be a walking giant cobra. Never got it. That Sargoth mask. Most of them have been restored and then mounted on their own stands. You can't wear them. They were too brittle. Like I said, they'd fall apart. And they're like $300 or $400. They're just not cheap. I've actually never seen a Sargoth for sale in the real world. I've seen them on eBay. I've seen some in people's collections for display. But I've never been at a convention with a Sargoth for sale because it would get ugly. I would be very tempted to buy that mask. The only other item of that caliber that I was tempted to buy was the Kraken from Clash of the Titans toy, but it was $500, and I'm like, that's the limit I have. I paid $225 for my Hot Toys Marty McFly, and that's hitting the upper levels of what I'm willing to spend on collectibles, even if it is a investment, because you could buy Sargoth and then sell him for the same or more years later, and it would be a net, zero net. You wouldn't lose anything in the deal, or you might make some. But it's just tough. I would love that mask in a case. I really would, but I didn't get it. I got the Don Post devil mask, and I was happy to be the devil. And that was the last monster Halloween I had for a long time, because after that, Star Wars was here, and I just decided, you dress up like Star Wars characters. Oh my God, After that, I was Darth Vader. I made my own chest panel out of cardboard and aluminum foil. Because remember, the costumes back then were just a plastic jumpsuit with like the character's face. Darth Vader. Star Wars. Darth Vader. Well, I didn't want to be that. I wanted to be the character. So I'd make my mother go to Save-On. Finally, you get a voice. I'm going to Save-On. I want the Darth Vader, the Ben Cooper Darth Vader. And you take the mask with the string around the back of Darth Vader. You put that on, and then you put on black shirt, black pants. You get a black cape. You get a lightsaber, and you tape the chest panel to your chest, and you're Darth Vader. I would accept no substitutes. I did the same thing with Boba Fett that I got from Save On. I was Yoda one year, plastic mask and all. And then early 80s, I managed to convince my mother for Christmas one year to get me a Darth Vader Dawn Post mask. She went to Disneyland to get it. Disneyland used to have this service where you could go up to the gate and get a shopper's pass. You would leave a little bit of money to cover the ticket. They'd give you a pass for an hour. You'd go into the park. You'd buy what you needed. You'd come out, show them your receipt, and get your money back. So you didn't have to pay for the ticket. My mother, God bless her, she drove to Anaheim. She parked. She went into the park. She went to the magic shop on Main Street, and she bought me a Darth Vader helmet Dawn Post. It was $35. I still have it with the price tag from Disneyland still in it. I got it Christmas morning, and then the next year, that was my costume. And I was like, I'm going to put together the greatest Darth Vader costume there is. And I was so proud of that mask. I was so... You put it on because it's two pieces like in the movie. You know, the faceplate goes on and the top piece Velcros on the top. And it's hard to describe what it feels like to put on a Halloween costume and to be somebody else for the night and say, look, tonight I am not, Jeffrey Tucker who goes to Lambton Elementary, who has, good grades in math but not so good grades in PE. Instead, tonight, I'm Darth Vader. I am Darth freaking Vader. And that's just such a cool feeling, emotion. That's why we love Halloween. We get to be something that we're not. We get to transcend this thing that we are physically and become something else. And you get to live out your weird fantasies of, I wanted to be Darth Vader. I really wanted to be Luke Skywalker, but that's a tougher costume to pull off because it's just clothing. 1983, I finally got to be Jedi Luke. My mother had started taking in people at our house, letting them live there because they had nowhere else to go. There were a number of people. I've talked about the drunks that live there, but my brother would also bring people into the house. He had a whole roster of friends, and he brought this girl, Tanya, to the house. Now, Tanya was a rude girl. Does that make sense, what a rude girl is? Like someone who listened to Madness and dressed in rude outfit. Remember, you ever see Sid and Nancy where the guy's like, I don't want to be a punk no more. I want to be a rude boy like my dad. Rude boys were they wore suits and little hats and sunglasses like Madness. Well, Tanya was a rude girl, and there was a shop in Norwalk Square called Rude Looks. Where it's at doesn't even exist anymore because they walled it off. It used to be there was a thoroughfare in the middle with a couple of shops, but they walled it off, and that shop just disappeared. But Rude Looks sold like capes and what would be considered early goth apparel. And she had this black cape that came up and over the shoulders and then back down to the floor. Does that make sense? So I put it on, and then if you added a belt, it looked like what Luke wears when he goes to see Jabba to try to get Han released. It's a very specific look. And we're putting it on going, I have to borrow this. Because at school they did the costume parade. And I'm going to be Jedi Luke. So I put the Jedi robe on, the belt, the black glove. Even though by the time he gets his hand burnt, he's no longer wearing the outer thing. It's just the flappy, the one that he wears to the Death Star. But this is the Jabba Palace look. But the big key to that costume was a paper towel tube. And the paper towel tube covered in foil with a drapery hook becomes a lightsaber that you hang on your belt. And that was important because I knew Lambton Elementary was not going to let me bring a toy plastic lightsaber to school, nor did I want to bring it. I wanted the lightsaber on his belt that he wears. So I put that on and I'm like, this is the greatest costume. That was the pinnacle of my childhood Halloween, was looking in the mirror, seeing that black cape and robe type outfit and that It was an item they didn't make back then. They didn't make lightsabers that clipped on. The first lightsaber that clipped on didn't come out until 85 for the Droids line. It's not a very good toy. I actually own it, but it's not a very good toy. I like it because it's not a good toy. But they didn't make the separate remove the blade lightsaber. You could take it off of the Kenner one, but because of the way it was made, the Kenner one didn't look like the pommel of his lightsaber. It just didn't look like it. But that tube, the foil on, did. It really did. And that was the last, childhood trick-or-treating, going out thing that I had. Halloween would continue, but it morphs. You only get a handful of childhood Halloween events that you remember. Now kids will have more because with social media and taking pictures and video the way it is, you get to keep them all as memories because you have photographic proof. But back then, you'd be really lucky if your parents took a picture of you in your costume because film was expensive. A lot of times they would take pictures with the intent of developing them, never develop them because the developing was expensive. So pictures from your childhood in my generation you treasure because there aren't a lot of them. Certainly not anything like the free-for-all of pictures that exist now. But after that, it morphed. I remember for Halloween 1984, David Mandela and I used the doors that were for sale in the yard. I've talked about it on the show how one of the drunks worked at a factory that had doors. They made doors or stored doors. So, of course, him and his hillbilly buddies stole a bunch of the doors, put them in our front yard, and people would stop and buy them. People would stop with these doors for sale. Oh, yeah, they're for sale. Let me get Terry. Terry would come and go, oh, help you find a door. So I remember taking the doors that year and positioning them so that there was a mini haunt maze to get to my front door. There was a couple of obstacles. There was a skeleton. And I remember looking at that. We put trash bags over the top. My mother was so pissed because we wasted a whole roll of trash bags. But we were putting together this crude Halloween maze in my front yard. And the big item for it was we went to Crawford's Market, which at the time might have been McCoy's, because McCoy's became Crawford's somewhere in the mid-'80s. But McCoy Crawford they sold goat skulls with the eyeball still in them and the tongue. And it was like $3. I got $3. We went to the store. We bought this goat skull. And that became the centerpiece of our scary maze to get your candy. It must have been the most disgusting thing you've ever seen. The eyeball sitting there glazed over in the sun until the sun goes down. And but David and I were there and we gave out candy, and that was a good time. That was a really good time. And 84 was probably the last Halloween I had, just as a kid, before puberty, before girls take over and sort of sideswipe you into doing things you've never imagined doing and wearing costumes you wouldn't imagine, matching costumes and all that kind of stuff. But 84 with David Mandela making that maze was really cool. So let's now talk about what I did in the teenage Halloween years. The teenage years, man. Those formative years where you try to avoid getting killed by people in high school who just don't like you. I had so many people who didn't like me. I guess that's why Halloween appealed so much, because you could be somebody else. Now, I started high school in 1984. Second year, 85, was summer of Back to the Future. So I started high school in 8th grade. I was only 13. So by 9th grade, freshman year, I was Marty McFly. But see, I dressed as Marty McFly non-Halloween. I dressed as Marty McFly whenever I could. I'd wear the jeans, the Nikes, if I had them, the jean jacket, and the vest. And I would go to school as Marty McFly. Women would look at me, girls would look at me in just disgust. They just couldn't believe I would do that. And for the most part, I didn't care. I just didn't care. But for Halloween, I was obsessed with Freddy Krueger. I had seen the movie. I thought it was a great character. This is before he got really merchandised. In the beginning, before, probably when Matchbox got the license, because Matchbox made the talking doll, the indestructible doll, the special effects guy dressed a Max FX doll who dressed as Freddy Krueger. But in the beginning, like any, surprise, unexpected hit, there wasn't merchandise. So you couldn't go to the costume shop and get a Freddy Krueger costume. They wouldn't have licensed Krueger costumes for at least 3 or 4 years after the first film. So I got a red sweater at the thrift store. I got masking tape and I got green spray paint. And I marked it off, and I spray painted those green stripes on it. I frayed the edges around the neck and the collar, where your hands go, and the sleeves. And I don't think you could wear a mask to school back then. Not that there was a Freddy Krueger mask to wear. So I had the fedora, I had the sweater, and then I had my own Freddy Krueger glove, which I made out of beer cans. I took some of the drunks' beer cans or Berg's beer cans, cut them with scissors, flipped them inside out, and attached them to a workman's glove with school brads. So it had flexible fingers with brads at every joint. The bottoms were these thin strips wrapped with more masking tape. And they had the metal pieces on top. And then the piece de la resistance was, we were at the mall and they had a credit card stand. And if you filled out a credit card application, they gave you a free set of steak knives. So I begged my mother. She goes, I'm not going to get that card. I said, you don't have to get the card. I just want the gift. I got the steak knives. I got home. I used a hammer to break the wooden handles. So they were just the metal blade with the metal prong that attached it to the wood, and I figured out how to attach that to the gloves. So I actually had a working Freddy Krueger glove with blades on it. And I swear to God, different time, you know this, I took this thing to school. I walked around school as Freddy Krueger in the most authentic costume I could get. And maybe I was Freddy before he got burnt. Maybe I was doing a prequel Freddy before that thing even existed. Because by 85, Freddy's Revenge was out, and like everybody liked Freddy back then. Now he was a thing. There was now a series, and they just kept coming out and coming out. Eventually, Spencer Gifts would get all that stuff in. The plastic glove, the mask, the hat. But back in the early days, man, there are things you get rid of. And that's probably one of the things I wish I had kept over the years, was that original homemade Freddy glove. But I think at some point, so as not to get arrested, I threw it away because it was a legitimate weapon. I made a similar piece from the short-lived Max Headroom TV show where they did a sport called raking, where they rode skateboards with motors and had these gloves with 2 blades coming out, like almost like Wolverine, but just 2. I made that to it out of the rest of the steak knives, and I don't know what I was thinking. But here's the thing: I wasn't a violent kid. I didn't, the stereotype. I didn't listen to heavy metal music. I didn't have long hair until way late in the 80s. I was a clean-cut, straight-A kid who just happened to like horror movies, and because I was obsessed with these movies, I wanted to make them tangible. I've said it about Back to the Future a lot. I didn't want to watch Back to the Future. I wanted to be in Back to the Future. Now, I didn't want to be in a Freddy Krueger movie because people were getting chopped up. But I really enjoyed the character. And I enjoyed Freddy a lot more than Jason. I never got the appeal of Jason Voorhees. I watched the movies. I went to see some even in the theater. But and especially like that, Jason Takes Manhattan, that's a terrible movie. He doesn't even get to Manhattan until the last 15 minutes of the movie. But that was just really dumb. So, let's move on down the line here. Some of the things I was going to talk about I forgot to do in the childhood portion was, one time me and Toby and a couple other guys went out, and one of the coolest things, we must have been about 10 or 11. So this is 81, 82. A guy chased us down the street with a samurai sword. He jumped up on top of his van and held the sword high, and it gleamed in the light. And then he ran after us, and it was the scariest Halloween moment I've ever had. I know he wasn't going to hurt us. I know it wasn't a crazy guy. But that guy, whoever he was made Halloween memories that night. I remember going one time to the Kiwanis haunted house. They used to have them at the park. It was like a 2-hour wait, but it was scary as all get out in there. I don't remember anything about it. And I do remember our church put on a haunted house for the kids in the congregation. And that was, they took 2 of the classrooms used for Sunday school, and they put blankets everywhere. And it was like a guided tour where a guy grabbed you by the shoulders and moved you through the maze of blankets and things. And at the end, a witch gave you, I think she gave us candy and some religious literature. So it was scary in more than one way, if that scares you. I remember an old lady on one of our streets gave us popcorn balls, like she had made homemade candied popcorn balls. The kind that are round with the red drizzle over it. I mean, it looks so good. Mother threw it right in the trash. I said, Ma, she's an older lady. She's not going to put a razor blade. You can cut it in half. No, you can't have that. The news says you can't have it. That's the beginning of the end of trick-or-treating, man. Every once in a while, one of the older ladies would also give you pennies. This was a thing in the 80s where you put your bag out, and instead of candy, she gave you pennies. I don't know why. That morphed into every year at church, they would give you a UNICEF box for your trick-or-treat bag. It was a little cardboard box that sort of popped up, and you were supposed to collect money for UNICEF while you were trick-or-treating, and then the Sunday after Halloween, put it in the collection box. I think my sister and I might have done that one year where we went to the trouble of getting the box, carrying it around, getting the money, and then taking it to church. I distinctly remember doing it at least 1 year. Interesting, right? Okay, so late 80s, I'd given up on trick-or-treating. We had built the haunted house and said our goodbye to childhood trick-or-treating, and instead I discovered Knott's Scary Farm. I went to Knott's Scary Farm for the first time. I think it was either 14 or 15. It was amazing. I got to go through Industrial Evil, which to this day remains, to me, the best maze we've ever done because it was so long. Just when you figured out that you had enough, the maze was only halfway done. It was in it's the area now where Accelerator is, but it used to be years ago Gasoline Alley and Wacky Soapbox, and that's where they had Industrial Evil, the greatest maze ever. My friend David Lewis and I also went to the first ever event at the Queen Mary. I don't think they called it Queen Scary or Dark Harbor back then, but I remember it was a lot of fun. You got to see parts of the ship that you had never seen before. It's the first time anybody had seen the indoor pool, and they had a woman playing a ghost there. That was a really cool time. 1989, I went out trick-or-treating again. I worked at a video store, Multi-Video, and they had bought a pretty professional-looking Batman costume. And I managed to borrow it Halloween night to take it trick-or-treating. The guy who ran the place, John English, had bought it so that he could take pictures with people, and I have my picture with the guy dressed as Batman. I'm wearing acid-washed jeans in it. It's one of my favorite pictures from that time period. My mullet is in full force. But I remember wearing this Batman costume around, and I didn't have a dance belt. You know what a dance belt is? A dance belt is what male ballerinas, ballet dancers, not ballerinas, but ballet dancers wear so that their privates are not on display. And I remember distinctly putting this Batman costume on and going, this shows way too much of me as Batman. It had the gloves, it had the gauntlets, it had the things for your knees, it had the chest piece that looked like Michael Keaton, and the belt, the big cowl. And I remember I somewhere have a picture of me. I don't know where it's at, but I am covering myself with my cape because it is not an attractive picture of Batman. Batman would never go out to fight crime like that. It would be over fairly quickly. Early 90s, I went to the first ever event at Universal Studios, Horror Nights. I went because, even back then, I considered Knott's to be the top. And Universal was trying it out for 1 year. And I went because Penn and Teller were performing there. And I wanted to see Penn and Teller because I had loved them, all through the mid-'80s. They were fantastic. The mazes were interesting. And I remember leaving that event, and they had people with clipboards wanting to, your opinion. And, of course, I was a big loudmouth back then. Still am, if you haven't noticed. And I gave my opinion and said, you guys have the most iconic Halloween house, haunted house type deal in the world, and it's not being used. And that was the Psycho House, which for that first year wasn't used. There was no studio tour. There was just a few walkthroughs and the Penn and Teller show. But, they were just getting on their feet. And eventually they would do it much better. And it involved the Psycho House very prominently. After that, I put together a Beetlejuice costume for work, because they were having a costume contest at Blockbuster Video with a big prize. And I dressed up as Beetlejuice, and I won the big prize, which was a bag of video movie swag. And again, wish I'd kept some of it. I didn't. It's all through the years, it's just sort of slipped away. There was even a Back to the Future 2 clock, which I had for years, and now I have no memory of where it went. I also wore that same costume the one and only time I went to Hollywood for Halloween. Me and Steve and Laura walked Hollywood Boulevard because they used to shut it down. They won't do it this year because of COVID, but they would shut it down and let people just walk around. And it was this huge party. I only went to it one time, but it was a lot of fun. I went to it one time because at that moment in time, boom, I meet Rachel. I'm finally happy, and I have a girlfriend who would eventually become my fiance and my wife. And in '93, we had a party at our house. The beach house had a party, the biggest Halloween party blowout ever. We had a live band. The band was called Pounded Clown. And one of their key signature bits was he would do the Silence of the Lambs, put the lotion in the basket. We had a great time at that party. It was the last time I had a normal Halloween. 1993 was the last time it was a normal, no obligation Halloween. Because, of course, in 94 Halloween, I've already started working at Knott's. And Knott's Scary Farm becomes such an important factor in my life that it just sort of overwhelms everything. And Halloween becomes this huge institution that I'm lucky and proud to be a part of. Now, the first year of Scary Farm, I was working in ghost town operations. I was not in entertainment, and I was working at the Silver Dollar Saloon in Ghost Town. At this point now in time, it's a shooting gallery. But before that, it was a small, tiny saloon, and me and this guy, Kurt, used to sell drinks to anybody who would run in being chased by the monsters. And that was just such a fun time. It was such a different time. Back then, Scary Farm was only 10 days, maybe 11 days. It didn't start till well into October and then ran till the end. It was a different animal completely than what it is. Of course, I would have a million things to say about working at Scary Farm, but that's a story for another time, folks, because that involves work, and I don't really talk about work on the show. Like I said, Halloween's always been such a big part of my life. I won't let COVID take it away from me. Rachel and I bought matching costumes this year. We're going to be members of the Star Trek Next Generation crew, the crews of the Enterprise. That's fun. I'm not even a fan of matching costumes, but I think they're cool costumes, and for what we're doing, it's appropriate because it's not a big mask. Because I put a costume together. I have Marty McFly 1985. I have Marty McFly 2015. I have Marty McFly as an old man in 2015 with the dual ties. I even have a giant rubber fly head that I made to be Marty McFly, which I wore to Monsterpalooza one year. But it'll be nice to just wear a costume that is a costume but doesn't involve a mask other than the mask I'll be wearing because of, the coronavirus. Hey, I should get some Star Trek masks to wear so they match, right? Oh my God, I just thought of that. Note to self, get Star Trek masks. I better write that down. Well, hey folks, I hope you're having a good Halloween season. It's certainly been the strangest of all time. I'm still getting back in the swing of things of episodes. They're not always on time. They're not always current. Sometimes I need a couple of days. Since I've been working Halloween, my schedule's been really crazy. Really crazy. So I appreciate your patience. I love that you're enjoying these episodes. I love doing them. It's always fun to sit down with something new to talk about. Even if it's something like, I've talked about Halloween before on the show, but to talk about it in a different way, you know? And let me tell you, for that Beetlejuice costume, they didn't make Beetlejuice costumes back then. To be Beetlejuice, I had to buy a white suit and a case of Sharpies from Office Depot. And I sat at work at Blockbuster for a week using the Sharpies to put the black stripes on that white suit. Yes. And I couldn't find a white wig that looked like Beetlejuice's hair. So I ended up having to buy a really bad Beetlejuice mask. And then I cut the face off of it and used bobby pins just for the hair. Because it was the closest you could get. I mean, right now, if you wanted to be Beetlejuice, you could find a million ways. You could be regular Beetlejuice. You could find a woman's version of sexy Beetlejuice. You could be Lydia. But back then, you had to make all this stuff. They did not, cosplay was not a thing. That word didn't even exist. And you had to make Halloween out of sweat and determination, like making your own actual knives version of Freddy's glove. So, hey, I made it. I'm still alive, even though I walked around with knives on my fingers. I didn't stab myself. I mean, that would have been the biggest thing, right? I wouldn't have hurt anybody else. I would have ended up, forgetting it was on and rubbing my eye and sticking it right through the back of my skull. But, it didn't happen. It didn't happen. So, happy Halloween, everybody. Check out Knott's Halloween while you can. Tickets are sold out, but they added every day they could, keeping to the guidelines. It's been great. It's weird to be at a sellout event. It's fantastic. I'm very proud. Check out Parks and Cons. They've been showing a lot of the home haunts you can go see. You can check out Castle Park. They're open for miniature golf, and I think they have some sort of walkthrough thing. There's a lot of drive-through events, Haunted Hayride, and Urban Legends. And Rachel and I are doing the Stranger Things one at the end of the month. I can't wait to talk about that. So we're not letting anything spoil Halloween. Halloween is in your hearts, man. So for all of us here at 91 Reasons, happy Halloween. And put on your silver shamrock mask because it's just beginning. I'm Jeff Tucker, and this is 91 Reasons.
Thanks for listening to 91 Reasons. Please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes. Find us on Facebook. Is anyone even still listening?
The Herald Examiner dealer. If you are a carrier, leave your name and route number and tell me what you need. Anyone else, leave your name, address, and phone number and how I can help you. Thank you.